This week on the Mainly Moonology podcast, for better or worse, we're going where angels fear to tread, but also we're talking about the upcoming new moon. Before anything else, let's talk about the new moon that's taking place this week, and it's actually taking place on November the 1st, pretty much wherever you are in the world. I'll just give you the times around the world. In LA, it's 5:47 a.m. on November the 1st. New York, it's 8:47 a.m. London, 12:47 p.m. and Sydney, 11:47 p.m. So if you know about Moonology, you know that we make wishes at the new moon. We set intentions, we make commitments to ourselves, and we do it as soon as we possibly can after the new moon. So you've got the times now. You can replay them if you need them. And just make sure you're setting your intentions and sending your wishes out into the world as soon as you possibly can after the new moon. So this week I'm actually going to be doing something which is going to thrill half of you and annoy the other half, which is talking about politics. More about that in a minute. But before we do that, I want to talk about the new moon itself. And it's going to be in the sign of Scorpio. Now, if you're not Scorpio and you're thinking, oh, well, that doesn't affect me, actually it does. It affects everybody. So let me quickly run through which part of your life you are getting this surge of new moon energy this week on November the 1st. So, and listen to your rising sign if you know it for a much more accurate prediction. So if you are Aries rising, Aries or Aries rising, but more if you're Aries rising, okay? I don't want to go into why you should listen to your rising sign right now because there's a lot to get through this week, but just trust me, if you know your rising sign, listen to that. And if you don't, take a moment to go and find it out. You can find it out for free at moonmessages.com/free chart. One word, moonmessages.com/free chart. Sorry. Okay, so here we go. Aries or Aries rising, it's to do with sex and money. Taurus or Taurus rising, it's to do with your love life. Gemini rising, it's to do with your daily work and health routines. Cancerian or Cancerian rising, aka Moonchild, it's to do with romance, creativity, and children. So you're getting a new start there. Leo, it's to do with home and family, new start, new energy. Virgo rising, third house, to do with communications, the way you think, the way you communicate. Libra rising, it's actually to do with cash, property, and possessions, which is nice. Scorpio rising, first house, basically your whole life, but also how you come across in the world. Sagittarius, it's your 12th house, so it's to do with fears and concerns and your spiritual life. You're going to get a new surge of spirituality if you go looking for it. Capricorn rising, actually this is your lucky wishing moon that you get once a year. Make a wish on the new moon if you only make one this year. Also heralds a restart for you when it comes to your friendships. Aquarius rising, 10th house, so to do with your career and ambitions, new energy coming in. Pisces or Pisces rising, it's your 9th house. So that's study, adventure, travel, anything to do with that is going to get this new energy. Now, every new moon is different. So let's take a look at what this new moon is all about. And I'm going to be taking notes from my Moonology Diary 2024. If you don't have it, it's a really good little book, but it's completely obviously sold out by now. But the Moonology Diary 2025 is available now and selling fast. So this new moon is taking place in the mysterious and meaningful sign of Scorpio. Okay, now we all have Scorpio in our charts somewhere. That's just how astrology works. If you cast your chart, you will see you'll have all 12 signs in there. You may not have planets in every sign, but you will have a sector of your chart which is ruled by each one sign or another. You know, it may be that Scorpio rules your love zone or your money zone or whatever. I just went through them. That's literally what I just did. Everybody has it everywhere. And Scorpio is also the part of our chart where emotions actually run really deep, where we can cling on to grudges and anything else a bit more than we actually should. And also, sorry to say, but we all have a little bit of this in us, our shadow side, you know, where we can be jealous or even spiteful or vengeful. So just be aware of that. But don't worry, this is actually quite a good new moon. So as you probably know, we all have what, I think it was Jung that first said it, but we all have a shadow side. And the new moon in Scorpio is really a time to commit to working on those shadowy parts of us that we don't necessarily want the rest of the world to see. So working on our shadow side, what does that actually mean? It's a question I've asked myself a lot because I know that we need to do it, and it's quite a sort of confronting thing to do. It really means being honest with ourselves about which parts of us we are not proud of, and of thinking how any negative traits we have manifest themselves, show themselves, and even hold ourselves back. So for example, you might have, you know, what you call a toxic trait. So it might be, you know, you're too quick to anger, or maybe you're too scared of confrontations or whatever. But it's that part of you that you consider is maybe your toxic trait, your toxic side. Also, it's about fears. So think about your fears, where your fears come from, because fears can make us behave in ways that we otherwise wouldn't. You know, if you act out of fear, you often end up acting out in ways that you otherwise wouldn't. So, you know, ask yourself some questions like, you know, am I letting myself down in terms of what I expect of myself because of fears or jealousy or, you know, the need for vengeance? You know, and more importantly, am I willing to make a new start when it comes to facing up to my shadow? And, you know, as always, remember, intention is everything. This is actually a really positive new moon with lots of really supportive planetary energy around it. We all need to work on ourselves. That never ends. And commitments that we make to ourselves now under the new moon, especially about improvement or letting go and moving on, because, you know, Scorpio reminds us that we can't hold a grudge forever, can really make a difference to the rest of our lives. It really can. FYI, this particular new moon in 2025 is taking place just ahead of a gorgeous alignment between lucky Jupiter and healing Chiron. Okay, so this is super powerful, and I strongly suggest you tap into these energies by making some new moon wishes, and perhaps joining me on Facebook. I'll be doing a new moon update, or if you are in my members, my Mainly Moonology membership, we will be doing a monthly manifesting meetup on Zoom, and we're going to be looking at healing. And if you're not a member of my membership, sign up at www.mainlymoonologymembership.com. mainlymoonologymembership.com. We have a monthly manifesting meetup, and we try to keep it really, really affordable. So in a nutshell, this new moon energy really is very special, and it can help us heal a past wound that might otherwise hold us back and even keep us trapped in the past, which is obviously the last thing any of us want. Now, let me just say here and now, if you are a Trump supporter, I would say just click off now. Hopefully you've got what you needed about the energy of the coming new moon. It can be healing. It might be healing for you to stop listening now, because what we're about to listen to, and you're very welcome to listen if you're a Trump supporter, but if you are a Trump supporter or you just don't care about politics, you know, maybe just say, you know, thanks very much, that was great. I'm going off to think about what I need to heal. But if you are kind of not necessarily a Trump supporter, maybe you're on the fence, or you don't hate Kamala Harris, I'm going to hand you over now to an interview with a woman called Julija Simas, who runs something called the Cosmic Intelligence Agency, which is one of the foremost sort of networks of astrologers in the world. And Julija, as I think I said in the intro notes to this podcast, she goes where angels fear to tread. She told me she was willing to stick her neck out and make a prediction about who is going to win the White House this week, okay? And on November the 5th, I think we cover the 5th on this week's podcast, if not next week. She happens to think Kamala's going to win, okay? Now, I try to keep my opinions to myself. I usually don't manage to, but I sort of mostly managed to keep my opinions to myself during this interview we did. But have a listen. It's kind of interesting. I'll be frank, it's quite advanced astrology in parts. Julija tends to actually lecture to her fellow astrologers. So she kind of comes at everything from a much more sort of lofty, advanced position. So it may well be that if you're not really into astrology, it might sound like double Dutch. But if you know a fair bit of astrology and you don't hate Kamala Harris, you know, I can't help who she decided to predict was going to win. Julija and I know each other. We were talking about something else completely. She mentioned that she thought Kamala was going to win and she'd done all the astrology. And I said, well, okay, listen, if you've done the astrology, you've done the homework, let's just talk about that, because most like and I'll just tell you one more thing, and hopefully this isn't going to happen again. But when Trump and Hillary Clinton went up against each other in 2016, I think it was, all the astrologers said that Clinton was going to win, and in fact all the polls said she was going to win as well. And then of course there were all those October surprises and everything turned around, and we saw Trump in the White House for 4 years, and a lot of astrologers had to eat a lot of humble pie and admit that, they got it wrong. Maybe they were swayed by the polls. They were swayed by personal opinion. Who knows? There were very few people out there in astrology land who supported Trump or who were kind of predicting he'd win. Now, you might say, oh, Yasmin, if you're posting this, you should post one from someone who says that Trump's going to win. But honestly, this literally came up because I was talking to Julija about something else. And I said, you know what, if you're willing to stick your neck out and make a prediction, she's a very well-known astrologer. So let's hear what she has to say. And if you love Trump, then you hope she's wrong. And if you love Kamala, then you know she's right. Either way, you're probably going to learn something about astrology and Kamala Harris's chart that you didn't know. So let's hand over to Julija Simas from the Cosmic Intelligence Agency talking about this American election. See you later. So this week on the Mainly Moonology podcast, I am super excited because we are going to be talking about something that people don't really want to talk about. We are going where angels fear to tread. We are looking at the astrology of Kamala Harris. Now, one of the reasons why people tend not to want to talk about this is, for one thing, back in 2016 when Hillary Clinton was up against Donald Trump, nearly every astrologer in the world thought, well, yeah, I think Hillary can do it. And, that was partly because she probably was going to do it. And then she actually did it. She won the popular vote. She lost to Trump. And I think a lot of people were like, oh my God, I'm never making a prediction ever again. So this week we have someone who is willing to stick her neck out and make a prediction. Her name is Julija Simas, and Julija is a renowned astrologer. I would say a cosmic guide. She has a deep passion for the interconnectedness of planets, and she is the founder of something you may or may not have heard of, the Cosmic Intelligence Agency, which is the CIA. Which brings together astrologers from around the world, and she basically does a whole lot of educating, teaching, and informing. She's dedicated her career to exploring and teaching astrology as a tool for personal growth, collective awareness, and transformation. Julija's work merges ancient wisdom with modern insights, and she is a sought-after speaker, educator, and guide in the astrological community. Her approach is brilliant, and she thinks Kamala is going to win. Is that right? Have I got it all right, Julija?
Hi there, Yasmin. Thanks for having me on. Well, when you look deeply into what's going on and then sort of look at Kamala's chart, it seems very much so that it's her time and her place on the planet right now, for sure, in so many ways, so many charts. When you do mundane predictions, in a sense, you have to look at a lot of things to make up your mind. You can't just look at transits. You can't just look at one thing. So there's again many levels, and I went through them, so I feel quite equipped.
Okay. So because a lot of the people who listen to this podcast are still on the start of their astrological journey, let's break down her big three: sun, moon, rising sign, before we go any further.
All right. So, of course, she is a Libran. Her birthday will be in a week from this podcast airing, and she's born at a full moon with the moon in Aries opposite. So, the first two are in opposition. So full moon people are, of course, very dynamic, very out there. An Aries moon is very bold, keeping up with things and moving forward, always moving forward, let's say, not so much looking back. And then the Libra, sun ruled by Venus, she's, Libran people are very much about seeing both sides, quite diplomatic, able to to, not bargain their way through things, but, say it how it is. They're very sort of dynamic in that way. And she's a Gemini rising. So a Gemini rising person is very much interested in a lot of, information, very cluey with, let's say, the intelligence or whatever's coming in for them. So, she's got a good way of, let's say, presenting herself in that way, able to talk. Well, although a lot of Americans, as they hear her, let's say, presenting her policies, they call her, let's say, speeches like making up salads, putting so many things together. So I see that as, a Gemini kind of rising, let's say, signature there. So they're the big three. And then we look at, of course, the rulers of her big three. So Mercury, her Mercury is in Scorpio. Some would say the ruler of the whole chart. And Mercury is very much connected to the sun. It's a fast-moving Mercury. It's very, let's say, fast-moving Mercuries are very sort of bright. Let's say they're on top of it all. You can't get a lot past them. And it is close to the sun. Her sun being ruled by Venus. Venus is in Virgo, conjunct Pluto. And Uranus, a bit further away. So she's of that generation that is born to change things, to do things, change the system for the better in whichever way, that perspective comes through. And of course, that's all ruled by Mercury. So the generation born in the mid-60s, I think there's also the fact that she is a wood dragon. She's just turning 60 years old. And it's the only time in your life that you will get the wood dragon return, right? So you'll get a dragon return every 12 years, but it's only every 5 times. When you're 60, will you get your elemental return as well? So that's pretty convincing in the sense of when you look at progressions and solar arcs, because it again is her timing, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Because when we have solar arcs, for those that you might not understand, we move the chart 60 degrees, the whole chart, like 60 degrees forward. Every planet moves the same amount of time for the 60 years you've been on the planet, right? Therefore, meaning that everything in her chart is sextiling its natal position. So that's always a really significant thing also. Um, so yeah, I mean, that's just something to start with.
Yeah, no, that's amazing, Julia. So one thing that jumps out at me is the fact, of course, being Gemini rising, and we know Donald Trump is Gemini. Is there a connection in their chart to speak of? I mean, is it
Well,
kind of not
yes, yes,
that
yes. They're both
surprising that they've ended up against each other?
not surprising because they're actually born 18 and half years apart from each other. So therefore their nodal axis is the same. So they both have the north node in Gemini and the south node in Sagittarius. So what Kamala Harris has her nodal axis on her ascendant and descendant. So that's like having the dragon, going across your ascendant and descendant, as we often refer to the nodal axis as, the flying dragon, or I do. So she's got that sort of across her ascendant, descendant. Donald Trump has his sun on that axis because he was born, and sun and moon, he was born also at a full moon, but an eclipse. So they have got that relationship, and both of them will be having on election day Jupiter and Venus on that axis. Okay, so Jupiter will be retrograde. Venus will be in the same place that she was 8 years ago when Donald Trump was elected. But
Oh,
of course, Jupiter wasn't there back in 2016 because we need a 12-year cycle for Jupiter to return. And so, there is, that's the one thing that you see on Donald Trump's kind of chart going, okay, well, he's got Jupiter around his axis too. But when we look further and deeper into all of these charts, it does really present that Kamala has got, the winning ticket, let's say, in so many ways.
okay, okay. So one thing to say as well, like regarding, the planets in 2016 and any which are back there in 2024, everything else has changed. For one thing, I was going to say, let's talk about the fact that, all the other planets, the big heavy duty outer planets, have shifted since he won. So even though, did you say Venus is back in the same place as it was when
Yeah,
he
Venus
won?
has got an 8-year cycle, so
Yeah.
every, the Venus return will be in the same kind of relationship to the sun. So Venus is well, 2 degrees difference on election day.
Yeah. But
Um,
I would argue, and I hope you agree with me, not that I'm trying to be partisan here, but it doesn't make that big a difference to him, because Venus is sweet and lovely and good. But the fact that, Uranus and Pluto and Saturn and all of those have all moved on means the chart is very different from when he won in 2016,
yeah,
correct? So
yeah,
it's not like, oh, well, that, just for people who are listening who don't really understand
yeah.
necessarily all the details. Okay, so let's try and keep it simple, but let's talk about a few of the winning tickets that you're saying that Kamala might have in her chart. I'm just going to bring the chart up again, okay?
Okay. So one of the things that we look at, again, sort of going down the charts and putting things together is the Aries ingress for 2024. We look at the Aries ingress to show, the dynamics of what's going ahead and, throughout the year. And then also we look at the other ingresses like the Libra ingress, which has just happened, a few weeks ago. So what we see in both of those charts is that, first of all, the Aries ingress had an Aries moon opposite Pluto freshly in Aquarius. Of course, Pluto's back in Capricorn now, but goes back just after the election. So we've got a very prominent feminine energy coming in, the moon and Pluto dynamic. Then what we have throughout 2024, and as astrologers looked into 2024, was that Ceres, the great goddess, is also squaring the nodal axis at that Aries ingress. She squares it throughout the whole of 2024, and she's a very significant, let's say, player in many astrological charts that we look at for the US throughout the year. And one of those things is also at her, what do you call it, solar return coming up.
Yeah.
In a week, we have Ceres rising on her
Oh, right.
ascendant
Wow.
in Washington, D.C., so as the relocated chart. And her natal chart relocated to Washington, D.C., has also got a 3-degree Leo rising, which is exactly where the moon was at the Aries ingress. So this
Oh,
is just a few examples of how, a solar return or a relocated chart, clocks into. Now, of course, she's been living in Washington, for many years, or and it just really pinpoints that she's sort of belonging there in that sense, right?
yeah.
To me. And then there's a lot of things in her progress chart that also point to, let's say, the rise that she's on, in the sense that when she became the VP back in 2021, her Saturn had just moved into Pisces on her MC, so changing signs, that's very significant.
Yeah.
Um, she has Vesta conjunct her MC in the natal chart, and they're already calling her Lotus. And
Right.
Vesta, to me, the glyph even looks like a lotus, right? So, and that comes from her South Indian origins and her mother's kind of heritage as well, right?
Yeah.
So, there's a few other things that I had looked at, over the time. I'm just trying to remember them all. Actually, her Venus also by progression has moved to 0 Sagittarius just recently.
I've got her
Um,
progress chart up now.
right. So we have Venus, just in Sagittarius at the election. And that moved in just as she became the nominee for the running, right?
Yeah.
So the timing's really quite incredible with these changes in her own progress chart.
Yeah.
And then just also over the last few months, her Pluto has gone retrograde by progression.
Right.
So I think that's really, really, really quite significant as well, in the sense of, coming into a different sort of power,
Yeah,
the power behind who and what she's about to sort of do. I know the job ahead. Again, if she wins, the concrete prediction is not not necessarily what I'm interested in a sense. It's just more likely that she is to come through with this than doing the same with Donald Trump's, let's say, solar return and so on. Right. And
okay.
his relocated chart doesn't change much, but she's kind of made for the place, let me say, for this time now on the planet. And again, if we look into next year, there's many planets changing signs. Neptune's
Yeah,
coming to zero. Aries, Saturn's going to be there. Uranus is changing signs. Uranus is changing signs to Gemini, which is, of course, the ruler of her first house. Again, we can look at the US, sorry, again, her relocated chart, and her Mars comes into the first house and trines her MC in Washington. So I think that's really also very dynamic in the sense like she's up for the fight. Do you know what I
yeah,
mean? Like she's up for this.
yeah,
And I think there was even when she became the VP and you know the US elected the older President Biden, you sort of thought, well, of course, her job is going to come up to be behind him because he's too old. I mean, I felt that like years ago. What about you?
I definitely felt like he was too old. I feel like with Kamala as well. What do you think about? I mean, I'm not sure how much you've mentioned it because I've been trying to keep up with what you're saying while trying to run the charts as well. Um, what about the nodal return and the node and the progressed node to her natal node and the progressed node to her ascendant? Because to me, that's pretty big as well.
Well, again, the progressed nodes don't move very much, right? So you look at the thing. Well, I do look at the things that are actually, but again, it's hovering around her ascendant. So
Yeah,
this is a lifetime sort of, let's say, energy, right? By
yeah,
progression. And another big thing that really stands out is when you put her chart with the USA independence chart or the Sibley chart, as it's called. We have a connection of her Pallas Athena. Now we all know what Pallas Athena means in mythology,
yeah,
the goddess that sort of kept up with what the wars and what was happening, the advisor to men, right?
yeah,
Or the advisor to men and war, and very much revered, of course, in Athens, and the great goddess in Greece. So
yeah.
the one that would provide. Now, her Pallas Athena is at 13 degrees of Sagittarius, and that's exactly the ascendant of the USA Sibley chart. So I think
Wow.
there's an amazing connection there. And then that Pallas Athena returns at the election to be exactly on her Pallas Athena, and therefore on the ascendant of the USA chart at
Wow.
the election. Yeah,
You have
so
spent a lot of time on this, haven't you, Julia?
well, I did. I was doing something else for a few other talks. So, you every session becomes, a sort of different focus. But
Yeah,
and then so I've seen Pallas Athena very strongly, and I've seen Ceres very strongly presenting herself. And Ceres, just quickly is very close. Well, sorry, Ceres could be related to the fixed star of Spica, which is currently
ah,
in tropical astrology, 23 degrees of Libra, very close to her, very close to her sun. And therefore also very much related to Ceres, the great provider in a sense, let's say. I mean, there's many, I don't think it's going to be easy for her if she gets in. I think she's got a big fight or even a war to deal with,
like literally a
coming into
war?
the well, there's a lot of USA astrologers think, talking about a civil war sort of coming into play somehow. And then so the repercussions I mean, we know that Trump is a poor, a sore loser and a poor loser, but I do think that he has had his time in the sun, and it's not his time anymore, even though he will cause commotion and fuss and, whatever else it takes, or the people that, are upset that he doesn't win will cause commotion and fuss in some way. But the thing, just another thing, Yasmin, when we look back at 2016, when Donald Trump did win and, sort of won the vote from Hillary, was that Uranus was conjunct Eris. Okay, like exactly. Now, this time, 8 years later, we have Chiron
Let's just
conjunct
define
Aries.
Eris for people.
So Eris is like a wild card that was discovered back in 2004 or five. Now I can't remember. I think it was five. But what she was known for astronomically was that she developed, because of her, let's say, discovery, it caused this huge commotion through the astronomy world because she was bigger than Pluto, right? And therefore, Pluto was demoted because, they made a new sort of segregation of dwarf planets, which made Ceres rise, right? Ceres not just being an asteroid anymore, she became a dwarf planet. So we have this series of feminine goddesses kind of, come up to power, let's say. So I follow that because I think it's so necessary in a very masculine, what do you call it? Genealogy for all the planets that we use, they're mostly masculine or,
Okay.
male, Zeus, Jupiter, all of that. So we've got this equalizing, and Eris had a lot to do with that. But as a let's say archetype, she's like the wild card or something unexpected or something that hasn't happened before, right? So when she was with Uranus back in 2016, I think Donald Trump is a very Uranian character. You don't know what he's going to do next. He's very, like he's erratic. He's
He's
completely,
so Uranian.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And then conjunct Eris. But this time we've got Chiron conjunct Eris. So I think, Kamala, if she wins, she's going to be much more of, a healing, recognizing the let's say the tears in the system that need repairing, more to do with that. I mean, how do you see that? You did mention something about Chiron earlier.
Yeah, so let me just go back to her chart. The thing with Kamala is I feel like as you can hear, I haven't really looked into this very much, just because I sort of steer away from too much politics, because in my job, I do have a lot of people who are pro-Trump, a lot of
Yeah,
people who are anti-Trump, a lot of people who are pro-Kamala, a
getting a
lot of
lot of
people like that.
backlash.
And honestly, I'm too sensitive to deal with the backlash that I get. I find it quite difficult to handle, which is one of the reasons
Yeah.
why I wanted you to come on here and tell me what you think, because also you're very good at this stuff. But so I did just take a quick look at Kamala's chart. Really, I think on the day probably that she was she accepted the nomination or whatever, however they phrase it. I'm trying to get her chart up, but it
Yeah.
won't go up. And what really stuck out to me was her. Let me just quickly look. Got all the charts now. Yeah, so she's got using whole sign houses and using her natal chart, not her relocator chart. She has Chiron in her 10th house, and which is actually opposing her Uranus, Pluto, Venus in that order opposition. And
Yeah.
so for me, that's kind of interesting already, because it's sort of like a bit of a healing signature for her, just in her career. So, like, were she not the soon to be president, maybe, of the United States, you might have said to her, oh, well, she could end up working in healing somehow. She could be a healer. She could, you know, be a nurse, or she could be someone who helps people, and who knows what she's done in terms of you know, as a you know, in the law, that she's worked in the law all this time. Maybe she has been someone who's helped people heal from their problems, and it all sounds very political, but actually deep down she's done that. We don't know. But the other thing that we've got going on right now is that Saturn is, in fact, as we speak, literally Saturn retrograde is partile her Chiron. So
Yeah.
transiting Saturn is partile her Chiron. And, you know, flash forward to if we go forward to the election, let's see, it's going to be, what is it, the 5th of November? It's going to be, yeah, it's going to be Saturn will be retrograde in her 10th house, and it will still be conjunct her Chiron. And so maybe because I'm, you know, Pollyanna goody two shoes, and maybe because I'm always hoping for the best and looking for the good stuff. But to me, I feel like she has, and also just from the news, I feel like she could, if she gets in, she could actually be a really healing force for the country, which, you know, given that you're saying that there are astrologers talking about civil war breaking out, obviously, you know, the country needs a bit of healing, and maybe she's the one to give it. So I don't know. What do you think about all that?
Yeah, or maybe has the medicine that's needed to prevent that, or what have you. So it's, so yeah, turn it around to think, let's see it as some kind of medicine that's needed, or feminine medicine. I mean, I think we've all kind of had enough of, you know, rich white men ruling the world.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's a lot of signatures, Yasmin, that are like on election day. We have the moon out of bounds. We have Ceres out of bounds, and we also have, oh, there's something else out of bounds. Oh no, that's inauguration day. But there's a lot of like pushing past the boundaries that have never happened before. So I think that she represents what hasn't happened before, in the sense of being the first female Black president, as opposed to Trump, who's already had a go. Do you know what I mean? So him returning for another sort of go doesn't fit a lot of the stuff for me that I've looked at. And that's, again, I know there's so many sort of levels of this, but I mean, another thing, Yasmin, is Kamala's progressed chart. She has the sun, like she is she's born with her node on her south node on the descendant, with the part of fortune, with Pallas Athena and the Black Moon Lilith, right? Which then shifts around to be on the ascendant of the USA.
Yeah.
But at the progress, now with her progressions, her sun is at 28 degrees of Sagittarius, conjunct Juno, and of retrograde Mercury in her progressed chart. So to me, Juno is very queenly, right? Juno is to be conjunct the sun at this time. Juno is one that keeps, you know, or Hera, like, you know, Zeus's wife, or Juno, Jupiter's wife, same. They keep up with the men. Do you know what I mean? Like, they are not ones to sort of bow down. They will do whatever it takes as well. And I think that is also a huge signature for her timing right now as well. So we've got to put in the asteroids for these feminine goddesses to come into play. Her progressed moon will also be in Cancer in her first house, so very strong. And it's in the full moon phase still, which she actually entered a progressed full moon phase at the end of December last year.
Right.
So she's still in that. Okay. So
yeah. Go on.
No. I mean, okay.
So I was going to say, Julia, can I just play devil's advocate for a minute here?
Sure.
So a couple of things, which is that she has her natal Jupiter at 24 degrees of Taurus, which is basically conjunct Algol, which, you know, traditionally with all the male astrologers was always a bad thing, but with all the very feminine astrologers right back down to Bernadette Brady, who says it's a symbol of feminine power. So
Yeah.
it's interesting that she's got that Jupiter conjunct Algol in her natal chart. I'm thinking that because
And
she was born.
Uranus is going to be
Yes,
there. Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
So
Or is
that's
there? Yeah.
interesting, and I hope it
Yeah.
plays out
Yeah.
well for her. But I think it's interesting that on election day there's Uranus conjunct Algol,
Mm-hmm.
conjunct her natal Jupiter, which is conjunct Algol, and you know what Bernadette Brady says about Algol is, you know, Algol represents feminine power, which shouldn't be feared because it's powerful. So that's very, very interesting to me. The other
Yes,
thing
definitely. Mm-hmm.
yeah, the other thing I was thinking as well while you were talking, which is so interesting, because you're talking about all these feminine energies that are coming in. But another thing that is happening in the next, you know, year or so is we do have a lot of masculine energies coming in, don't we? Because we've got Uranus moving from Taurus into Gemini. We're going to have Pluto moving from Capricorn into Aquarius. We've got Neptune moving into Aries. You know, there's just a lot of shifts happening, but a lot of it does have a kind of a masculine signature. Not that Capricorn is a particularly feminine planet, but so that one doesn't really count so much. But I feel like there are, and in fact, I was talking to Rick Levine about this, and he and I were talking about how the energies are shifting and they're going to be more masculine. So it's interesting that you're seeing that there are these feminine energies around right now as well. So what do
Well,
you
the
make of all
feminine
that?
energies are a bit more faster moving and a lot more immediate. But like the moon, we need the moon to be in favor or whatever at the time of, let's say, an election, right? These longer term things like Uranus going into Gemini and Pluto into Aquarius, these are huge. These are
Yeah,
like, they're going to be with us for years,
yeah.
right? So I think with this at the cusp of something so big, look, who knows how it will go after that. Again, I'm just sort of saying that her things are lining up a lot better than what Trump's kind of lining up, let's say.
Okay, well, that actually leads me on to a question, actually, because one thing I have observed with Trump over the years, let me just see if I can find his chart. There it is. One thing I've observed with Trump over the years is he very much is Teflon. You know, it doesn't really matter what he does or says, everything seems to go his way. Somehow he just has that Teflon thing. And I've never really been sure what it is in his chart that does it. Any thoughts on that? It can't simply come down to his Leo rising that he acts like a king, he thinks he's a king, and therefore everyone treats him as a king?
Well, look, quite honestly, I think he's kind of lost it now. Like he
Right.
might have gotten away with it for a long time, but you can see that sort of dwindling. Yeah, you've seen it sort of, it's not as sharp as it used to be, if it was ever sharp, and yes, the Leo, it's the arrogance. Like he never admits he's wrong. He never admits, so he makes things up as he goes. The Gemini thing, very much making up, his policies on the run, so to speak, or,
Yeah.
stuff like that. I mean, again, I mean, what's his lucky thing? He has got Jupiter and Venus in a what we call mutual exaltation reception. So,
Yeah.
Venus is exalted, or sorry, Venus rules Libra, Jupiter is exalted in Cancer. So there's a combination going on there.
Yeah.
And I think the luck of a Sagittarius moon. I think Sagittarius is a lucky sort of energy
Yeah.
overall.
And actually, just for any Geminis out there who are thinking, wait a minute, what she's saying, Geminis make things up as they go along. I mean, kind of, but excuse me, that's a blessing because, you know, if you're the kind of person who can make things up as you go along, you know,
But
you
it
can get
depends
away
on
with a lot
what
of stuff that other people
context.
can't.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying I mean, I'm sure there's been Gemini president, USA presidents. I can't think, but
Well,
it
we had Boris
depends
Johnson
on the
as a
context.
Gemini prime minister.
Sorry,
We had Boris Johnson as a Gemini prime minister when
right?
Trump was a Gemini
Yeah,
president. We had two Geminis.
yeah. Yeah. But again, I mean, this is, where personalities, there's a lot of, what do you call it, nuances for every Gemini that speaks. Do you know what I mean? So,
Yeah.
but in this particular case, it's the way that sort of he can't take any criticism. These kind of what do you call it, assassination attempts, let's say,
Do you
have
believe they're
maybe put
real,
him
or do you
off.
think he's made them up?
I have very, very doubtful that they're real. Yes. Yeah.
Does he have, let's quickly look at his chart. Does he have any indicators for multiple assassination attempts going on in his chart right now?
Let me
Okay, no,
see.
he's got Jupiter in his sign, which is kind of, let me just
Jupiter,
quickly.
Jupiter. Okay, so Jupiter again. Now, I've talked about this with other people. Jupiter on his, let's say North Node and stuff at this time, he's in so many, law. He's in so much trouble. Okay, like in the sense to do with the law and spending all his money on fighting law court.
Yeah.
So that's the Jupiter on his Gemini to me right now. Do you know what I mean? It's like kind of like it's he's gone over the top in the past and he's paying for it. All Jupiter transits aren't, amazingly good. They can be incredibly overwhelming and really show the truth of the matter. And I think that's what he's getting a really good taste of, quite
Yeah,
honestly.
I think though with Donald, sorry, that's his transit chart
Yeah.
right now. Um, yeah, I don't know. I'm not that thrilled that he's got Jupiter on his sun right now because it's just going to mean more publicity for him as well, which is,
Well, again, he seems to have quietened down somewhat more since Biden sort of went out of the race. So, I mean, again, I'm not watching the news all the time. There's people that are that are right onto every sort of thing that he says, perhaps at this time. But anyway, I'm just more, let's say relaying what I've seen in Kamala's chart and that she's got so much dynamism that's showing that it's her time and place, as I said before. Whereas he's had his time. That's my sort of
your
reasoning.
take. Well, I'm more than willing to take your take on that, Julia. I'm actually delighted to hear it because honestly, I would love to see a female in the White House. And I said that when Hillary was running, and everybody said no, she's the Antichrist because they were getting all the fake news from the GRU getting
Well,
onto.
again, there's so much stuff going on, isn't there, in that sense of, what they say about people. And look, I'm not saying, she's the bee's knees at all. Kamala is going to have come with a lot of baggage as Hillary would have and stuff. They've got a lot to be accountable for. Supporting Israel and Ukraine, like there's just so much, there's so much she's stepping into here.
Yeah.
But again, this fight, again, I'm going back to the Aries ingress and the Ceres during this year, is that the Pluto, and just most recently the Libra ingress had Venus square Pluto. She is fighting for the women and their rights as well, and that's been a big signature of 2024. And again, the big fight is again still about from those white men, the patriarchy that have been ruling the world. And I think part of this is a hope for me, but again, I've done the exercise of looking closely. Do you know what I mean? As opposed to having an opinion, as we shouldn't do as astrologers, we need to sort of look at what is really showing up. And there's a lot of other things showing up with geodetic maps and astrocartography, but that's a little bit hard to do on a podcast. So again,
Okay.
these degrees and angles that she is, let's say, locked into, again, very much support what, her sort of place in the White House, let's say, by the end of the
All right.
year.
Well, let's wait and see. So,
Let's wait and
Julia,
see.
tell
Yes.
people about what you do, about the CIA and all that, and how they can, like, I'm actually going to label this podcast as, for people who already know astrology, because what you're talking about is not, beginner stuff. So tell us about the CIA within that idea as well. Like who are you looking for? Who are your people, and where can people who want to know more find you?
Okay, so look, the CIA started, back in 2005 and grew from there with a group of Melbourne astrologers that really were kind of sick and tired of seeing astrology dumbed down. Like, the good stuff, the real stuff, the stuff that we learnt and studied and what have you was not what was being presented into the world. And so our mission was, let's show the real stuff. And social media came through at the right time for us in the sense, our name, sort of Cosmic Intelligence Agency, grabbed people in the sense. And so we weren't hiding behind, I got nothing against sun signs, but it wasn't our stuff, right? We wanted to show people how it worked. We wanted to tell people, what to look for, um, like explain how and why we would say something. Do you know what I mean? Where does that come from?
Yeah.
So then now, of course, now the CIA is more about a membership and, teaching people, teaching astrologers also more about, how to deepen their understanding of things like the astronomy of astrology, putting it all together in a sense, as opposed to, like, many of us may learn one stream of astrology, like evolutionary astrology or psychological astrology. The CIA are very much about putting many things together, experts in many departments, let's say, and honoring all of it, actually, Yasmin, because there's a legacy from so many thousands of years. It's all important, but it's also as important to what we do now with it as well. And we keep saying the mission worked because we did gather 1.5 million Facebook followers back in 2015. And we say the mission worked because people are so much more interested in astrology and not just the simple stuff, right? Of course, you've got to start somewhere. But now that there is such a sort of fervor behind astrology and understanding it, we want them to understand it as part of a real living story that we are embedded in. Like when we start doing it, we know it's all around us. And so being and becoming confident in using it in many parts of living and our lives. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's of
Yeah.
course very helpful, as you know, very healing, very consciousness raising in so many ways. I mean, for anyone that's followed astrology, I think a big part, Yasmin, was back in 2013, 14, and we started reporting on, well, as many did, Jupiter square Uranus, right? And it happened 7 times, I think. And people just started really noticing it in the world and what was happening and, the revolts and the Arab Spring. And here it is. And now we haven't stopped. We saw that line up with, the Capricorn Council, as we called it before COVID, or just as COVID started. I mean, how spot on. Now people are knowing what is going on because they see it. They
Yeah.
see it happening in the world, and then there's more of that. So I think that connection to that it's in the real world is what we want to see.
And
Yeah.
what do people get if they sign up for the CIA? What do you
Well,
what do
we
you
we
include in
have
the membership?
webinars every 2 weeks with expert astrologers, agents as we call them, and guests that teach us something pretty much. Like last week we had Andrew Smith in Ireland who was looking at the centaurs. Now the centaurs are not asteroids, but they're beyond Saturn and in between Uranus, and sometimes go even further. So he's been teaching us about those. We had Sedna in Gemini with Alan Clay 2 weeks before that. We've had the wonderful Nikki Allison, a Melbourne astrologer who's a medical astrologer, teaching us on herbs. And I mean, it's just like, have a look on the website. To join the academy, we've actually got we call it an academy because you are learning a lot with us. And again, topping up. We've had members now for 8 years. So we're really sort of, people are loving the content. And there's an archive. So everything that happens is always accessible with your membership and login. And then, of course, there's discounts to retreats and other bigger online events that we might have. So yeah,
And
it's a
what
really
is the
good
website?
quality.
What is the website, Julia?
Cosmic Intelligence Agency.
Dot.
Go to the website there and then look up the CIA Academy. And we have a 20% off. Actually, by the time this airs, I could leave it on till then, Yasmin, if you wanted me to.
That would be great.
All right.
Thank you.
So let's just say it's on till the 15th of October, okay,
Okay.
because of this. And yeah, you can
And
get
it's
20% off. Intelligence. That's right.
20intelligenceagency.com.
Yeah. .com, easy. I mean, there's a YouTube channel. As I said, I did just recently, we did an equinox update with some of the agents, and I talked about and showed the charts of, Kamala and Ceres and, the relocated charts and all that kind of stuff. So if you want to sort of get into that more, and yeah, just sort of keeping an eye on what we do. I mean, you can join all the webinars we do just as a one-off if you're interested in one in particular. So yeah, we're pretty much just focusing really because social media has changed so much, and we're not particularly interested in following a lot of the things. We are focused on our own work in a sense, and keeping up the quality and passing it on.
And do you
So
do a conference every year, like a CIA conference? Because it sounds like it's begging to be a conference once a year.
I'd love to have it. We have a retreats. We haven't done big conference yet because, well, it's a big sort of investment in that sense. We do them online though. We will have a big one next year, so keep an eye out for that. But I would truly love a like an in-place one. But
Yeah.
because we're based in Australia, it's not the easiest thing. I mean, we were thinking of one, then COVID happened. And then the Australian astrologers have got their conference where we were thinking of having it, where they've never done it before. So
Okay.
anyway,
Yeah, or
uh,
do it in like Dubai or something, so everyone flies in from both sides of the world.
well, yes, yes, yes. I mean, yes, yes, we will.
And
Hopefully in the next 2 years. Yeah.
Yulia, so for people who are really starting astrology, who don't know their Eris from their Sedna, um,
Yes.
like, can they come into your world and learn from the ground up, or do you need people who are already fairly accomplished?
Well, I mean, like anything, I did a series of, beginner classes like for 2 years, right? So you can purchase those, and it is like the ground level. Again, you need to take 2 years to do that. But although I would probably direct you somewhere else because I did sort of record them many years ago, I've never sort of gotten around to it. I would direct you to someone like Kepler College or another good astrologer that has, or one of the agents that has done these courses. But you need to really commit to 2 years, whichever way you do it, right?
Yeah,
Like there is no quick fix. There is that you can't sort of say, you're going to learn astrology in 10 weeks. You might learn about the houses and the aspects in 10 weeks, but you got to give time for reading. You got to read some of the classic books. Like absorb and have time to absorb it. I mean, a lot of people, and you probably get this yourself, Yasmin, is like, but I want to know what you know. Like, well, it's not going to happen in a couple of weeks. It's not going to happen in a couple of months. I
no.
mean, we've both been at it for what, 25 years or something, so or more maybe for you, actually, I'm not sure. But so yeah, and then, we spend a lot of time researching. It's not to me, astrology can be a quick fix. You can make a judgment quite quickly because you know what you're talking about. And then of course there's the real periphery stuff that sort of makes sense and or can, or again, sometimes we hear things that's like, where did they get that from? So I think a good training, a good background, a good standing, good root that you would have with astrology is what you need to sort of spread out and then sort of, let's say, fly with it. So
Yeah.
yeah, which is a great
Sounds like you
feeling.
need to do a beginner's course to offer people as well, or re shake up your old beginner's course and you know,
Yeah, I have been
the
thinking about
people
that.
who
I
want to know
know.
what you
I'm
know,
just always
but they've got too far to go. So you help them on that track. Maybe that's like the prequel.
Yeah, well, look, I mean, again, Yasmin, there's just so many courses, so many classes. So we're again focusing on, moving forward with it and let's say developing what we can all do as a
Yeah.
collective in
Yeah. And you've
that
got your
sense as
niche
well.
as well, which is a brilliant
Yeah,
niche.
yeah, thank you.
Yes, and I will just say for everyone listening, Julia is hugely respected in the astrological community for the CIA. It's something that people know how much she knows and how dedicated she is, and the quality of what's coming out of the CIA is definitely second to none. So, like if you do already know astrology, and if you do know you've said familiar Aries, so to speak, it's going to be a treasure trove if you're like, okay, I've gone beyond the basics, which is pretty much what I teach is the basics. If you've done that and
Yep.
you really understand the basics, it really is the next level where you will start to really up level and upskill, so that you can start to talk about some of the things that
Yeah,
we're
and look,
talking about
there's a lot
today.
of stuff there, like Sedna in that we did with Alan. It's about an archetype, and the archetype now being in the new sign, so it's hugely I was going to say entertaining. Yes, that too, but informative, and you don't have to know a lot of astrology to know that, but
No,
you will get.
exactly.
And so there's a lot of content in our membership that is like that as well, right? And then there might be a few things that, go over your head or whatever. You can ask about it. That's what the membership's for. You can say, what was that about? I
Yeah.
don't understand that. So again, I would sort of say maybe not real beginners, but if you've been doing it for a while, you will be able to maybe sort of trap into
Deeper.
and go, yeah, yeah, yeah,
And it will
definitely. It's
take
not,
you
yeah,
further,
yeah,
like if you're or you do know the basics, you know your chart, you understand the concept of progressions, you understand the concept of transits. If you've got that far, this will really enhance your understanding. And also the other thing is that Julia has basically, sorry, I keep swapping between Julia and Yulia,
that's all
because
right.
as we spoke about before we came on air, actually Yulia accepts both, but I said I would like to call her Yulia because I think that's actually the traditional pronunciation of her name. Yulia has handpicked all the agents that are in the CIA, and they are all brilliant. So she's brought together some of the best astrological minds on the planet. So you will be learning from people who, really know their stuff. And quite honestly, if I can say with all affection, and I'm talking about myself being like this as well, I'm not it's not about someone else, I'm the same, who are basically kind of obsessed with
Yeah, yeah.
astrology.
You have to be
And
obsessed.
yeah, you have to kind of be a bit obsessed with astrology in order, because there's so much to learn and you'll never learn all of it. There's just no way you'll ever learn all of
Yeah,
it.
yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah.
so if you want to be taught by obsessed astrologers who are expert
Well,
in
we
their
also
field.
we also have guests, and look, the difference between an agent is that an agent has to represent us. So again, we want someone that is, like someone like you. Of course, we take you in, Yasmin, but you're too busy. So an agent has to represent us, has to sort of put in some time, let's say, throughout the year. Not a lot, but articles, webinars, taking over something. But of course, that doesn't happen. Everyone promises this, but that doesn't happen, right? So then they sort of move off to the side because they haven't done their stuff. So these days I work with a smaller core group of agents, and that can change because it depends who's active at any particular time, right?
Yeah.
So it's sort of fluid. And then we do invite guests again. So and that's why we started a membership, because it was very tricky to just say, oh, yes, you can be an agent of the CIA. We don't know who you are. They would send us stuff. There's some very lonely people out there, as you know. So, yeah. So we kind of shifted things over the last few years.
Yeah. Oh, interesting. Okay. So yes, highly recommended. Julia, thank you so much
Oh,
for
my
being
pleasure,
here
Yasmin.
today. It's been absolutely brilliant. And let's wait and see what happens on November the 5th over there in the
Well,
USA.
again, I don't like the word prediction, but again, as you sort of see it come together, that's what I see. I'd rather say that.
Okay. All right.
Right.
Fantastic. Thank you, Julia.
Thanks for having me, Yasmin. All the best.